Hey guys, Infamous is done now, so we can finally cover what you really wanted to see from that poll. The Batman arc. Oh. Welcome to A Line Through Time, where I take the time to look through your favourite franchises and work out how it all lines up. Alright, this is going to get complicated and long, so insert your own sex joke here and let's move on. The Batman Arkham series started way back in 2009 with Batman Arkham Asylum, not to be confused with Arkham Asylum, a series house on Serious Earth. The game is really the first time a game had ever adequately simulated the feeling of being the Batman, much like Spider-Man 2. It's also got fantastic character designs, aside from Harley Quinn, and an all-star voice cast including the reprisals of Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill and Arlene Sorkin as Batman, Joker and Harley respectively. The story, written by Paul Dini, sees Batman take the Joker to Arkham Asylum, which was all part of the Joker's plan to take over the asylum. He releases all the inmates, including villains like Poison Ivy, Killer Croc, Bane and Scarecrow, the latter of whom sections were by far the most popular. He's also had a stronger version of Bane's Venom formula called Titan created, which he uses on himself to fight Batman in probably the single most anticlimactic final boss in that entire generation. But all in all, really good stuff. There was also a 16-page prequel comic, Road to Arkham, that basically just shows Batman taking down some of the villains who appear in the game, possibly intended as how they were imprisoned in the asylum in the first place. It's basically just a prologue to the game, so I'm going to count it as part of the game in the on-screen timeline, at least until the end. 2011 saw the sequel, Batman Arkham City release, taking the series from Metroidvania to open world. The game picks up over a year after Asylum and sees Hugo Strange manipulate Warden-turned-Mayor Quincy Sharp to convert a portion of Gotham City into a walled-off prison city. The plans for Arkham City were even hidden away in the previous game, and people only found out when the developers revealed it close to the sequel's release. That was awesome! The story introduced Catwoman and Robin, the former of whom's playable portions were paid DLC unless you bought the game brand new because fuck you money. The game also took a shocking turn by actually building on the previous game's awful climax, with the reveal that the Joker is dying from the Titan he injected himself with, and he eventually succumbs to it. This then leads rather nicely into the Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC, which sees Robin become playable as he helps Batman escape a trap laid by the grief-stricken Harley. It picks up 2 weeks after the main story and doesn't really go anywhere. The most new story is the debunking of the pregnant Harley Easter egg, or the horrendous darkening of it depending on how you look at it. But before the DLC release, there was a 5-issue miniseries also called Arkham City that begins 6 months after Asylum and centres on the creation of Arkham City, Hugo Strange's rise to prominence, and the establishment of the major players, concluding not too long before the start of the game. It's kinda weird that Warden Sharp has been elected mayor within 6 months of the Arkham inmates taking over the asylum on his watch, even with all the behind the scenes scheming, but I guess superhero civilians have always been a bit on the dim side. Another comic, Arkham Unhinged, was a weekly digital series that told an assortment of stories set largely during Arkham City's operation. The canonicity of some of the stories is questionable, especially when Batman gets into other encounters during the game that we somehow don't see, or when elements are contradicted by later games, and the amount of stuff Batman does in this one 10-hour block only becomes even more implausible. There's a hierarchy of canon here, like with Star Wars, main games, then side games, then other media. For simplicity's sake, let's place it during City since most of the events take place around then. Probably the most significant thing we learn is that Ra's al Ghul and Hugo Strange begin working together about a year before Arkham City. It's worth a read for some interesting shorts, but skip the last 15 chapters, there's barely any connection to the Arkham storyline and it ends on a cliffhanger with no resolution. Thanks DC. There's also Arkham City Endgame, in which the Joker has one last plan in place for after he dies, which involves putting a bounty on the recovery of his body to drive Gotham into a frenzy which doesn't go anywhere, and blowing Batman up at the asylum, which the comic never does explain how Bruce survives, although that could just be the incomprehensible artwork getting in the way. Honestly, most of the Arkham comics are a complete waste of time. Batman alludes to being captured by Harley in the DLC 2 days prior to the comic, so let's place it as such. The Joker is cremated in the end, which is important for the sequel's placement. 2011 was closed off with the iOS game Arkham City Lockdown, which is the least offensive game NetherRealm Studios ever released, especially in that year. Despite the name, Lockdown actually takes place on the streets of Gotham right after the Arkham City project is announced. A bunch of villains escape the asylum, Batman beats them all, and the final boss is a Poison Ivy-controlled Robin because why not? Some details make placement a little tricky, but we'll discuss that in a minute. For now, let's place it alongside the City comic. With the City era concluded, 2013 gave us the underrated Batman Arkham Origins. Origins, a prequel developed by WB Montreal instead of usual developer Rocksteady Studios. Origins is set 5 years before Asylum at the end of Bruce's second year as Batman, which will become much more important later on. This time, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill were replaced with Roger Craig Smith and Troy Baker, because as I recall, Hamill initially saw Joker's death as the best time to retire from the role, which led to Conroy doing the same, though both did later return for a billion other appearances. You can take the Mark Hamill out of Arkham, but you can't take the Arkham out of Mark Hamill.
Fuck you! I ain't having that shit!
Yeah, fuck you, man. The story sees Black Mask plays a hit on Batman's head on Christmas Eve, leading to 8 assassins coming after him, including a luchador for some reason. I think it might be stretching it a bit to call Firefly an assassin. It later turns out that Black Mask has been replaced by a mysterious Newt the Joker. It's bloody obvious thanks to his aggressive emphasis in marketing materials. The game is the origin of the Batman-Joker relationship that is the focus of the series, as well as the origin of Arkham's reopening. Joker's presence was marketed less than only Deathstroke, who only ends up with a shit boss fight and 2 short cameos. He also causes problems later on in the next main game, where it's made quite clear that Slade hasn't been back to Gotham since Origins, even though he appears in the game's tie-in comics and in Lockdown. As you'll begin to understand, some details need to be ignored because there are a lot of inconsistencies with this franchise, so we're ignoring that detail and Lockdown is remaining where it is. But back to Origins. There was also a multiplayer portion focused on a conflict between Joker and Bane, which Batman and Robin intervene in. It may seem like it's intended as the immediate fallout of the campaign's events, but Robin's presence contradicts that. Robin here is Dick Grayson, who is Nightwing by the present day of the series. He's not present anywhere else in the Origins era, so this portion would take place at the end of that era. Origins had 2 DLCs of note, Initiation and Cold Cold Heart. Initiation is a series of challenge maps contextualised as Bruce's first year of training with the League of Assassins. Naturally, this is the earliest point so far, though how much time passes between this and the debut of Batman, I don't know. Cold Cold Heart features the debut of Mr. Freeze and takes place on New Year's Eve, 1 week after Arkham Origins. There was also a choose your own adventure comic also called Arkham Origins, with some hilariously embarrassing ends for the Caped Crusader. It follows Batman as he investigates Black Mask, Penguin, and the vast web of corruption throughout Gotham sometime before the game. The same year saw a 2D Metroidvania game called Arkham Origins Blackgate released by Armature Studio. Picking up 3 months after Origins proper, but lacking Robin, the game sees a Joker Penguin Black Mask conflict cause a prison riot at Blackgate. The main purpose of the story is to continue a subplot that started in Origins where Amanda Waller tried to recruit Deathstroke for the Suicide Squad. Here she recruits Deadshot and Bronze Tiger, but was also trying to get a hold of Bane. But why all this setup? Batman Assault on Arkham is an animated film released in 2014 focused on the Suicide Squad. Many would say a better Squad film than the DC Extended Universe release. The only Arkham characters that appear in the Squad are Deadshot and Harley though, so Deathstroke and Bronze Tiger were kinda pointless. The Squad is sent into Arkham to steal a thumb drive from the Riddler with a secret ulterior motive which Batman aims to stop. The Joker also features prominently and other Arkham series villains get cameos throughout. It's supposedly set 2 years before Asylum, which will cause a number of problems later on. In 2015, Rocksteady closed off their trilogy with Batman Arkham Knight, which picks up on Halloween night, 9 months after the Joker's cremation. Batman must defend Gotham from the vengeful Scarecrow, last seen being mauled by Killer Croc at the Asylum, and his new enforcer, the titular Arkham Knight, a mysterious new original figure in the Batman mythos who knows all of Batman's tactics and skills and has a personal grudge against Batman for his Jason Todd. This is the Red Hood storyline again. You may think I'm spoiling it, but his first on-screen appearance makes it blindingly obvious that it's him. We also learn that Jason was abducted by the Joker and held prisoner for at least 6 months before Joker put a bullet in him. We'll be placing that later on to avoid complications. Bruce is also dealing with a manifestation of the Joker inside his head thanks to being injected with Joker's Titan-infested blood in City, even though he got the cure for that in that same game. You can tell this game has a different writer. Bruce manages to purge himself and defeat Jason, Scarecrow and about 14 other villains in the span of about 8 hours. It's ridiculous. Bruce is publicly unmasked by Scarecrow and initiates the Nightfall Protocol, which involves blowing up Wayne Manor and seemingly perishing. Needless to say, this is the end of Bruce's career as we know it. The game had a lot of DLC stories released to flesh out the story and add more playable characters. The first was proudly announced in the game's announcement trailer, the Harley Quinn Story Pack. This one takes place shortly before the game, with Harley breaking into Bloodhaven PD to free Ivy, defeating Nightwing along the way. Yes, Harley Quinn beats Nightwing and BPD officers on her own.
I'm sorry, but no.
Second was the Red Hood story pack, which also released day 1 following Jason as he hunts down Black Mask. This was presumably done to throw off suspicion by presenting Red Hood as already existing in the setting in an ambiguously set chapter. Since Jason is dedicated to his lust for revenge until the game and the Red Hood mask is the damaged Arkham Knight mask, this is obviously set after the game, supposedly over a month later. Next was the most meaty piece of additional content, Batgirl, A Matter of Family. Needless to say, it centers on Batgirl before the Joker crippled her. She works with Tim Drake to save her father from Joker and Harley. Joker flees at the end while Harley is taken into custody. The exact placement is a little tricky, but Tim being Robin places it closer to Asylum than Origins. I'll come back to this later. GCPD Lockdown follows Nightwing as he stops a raid on the GCPD aimed at freeing Penguin. Dick's dialogue with Lucius Fox alludes to Tim and Barbara being on their honeymoon, their marriage was alluded to at the end of the main game, so it seems to be set shortly after the game. While the DLC makes no mention of Red Hood, it also doesn't mention the Demon Bat from Night's epilogue, who seems to have debuted around the time of Tim and Babs' wedding, so I guess we can't use the lack of references as evidence here. Still, I'd guess the wedding would take more time to set up than a month, so this comes after Red Hood. Catwoman's revenge begins the night after the main game, with Selina out to destroy everything the Riddler has built in revenge for putting her through a death game the previous night. She doesn't seem too torn up over Bruce's alleged death despite giving up a big haul to save him in City and kissing him in Night. Still, better characterization than Injustice, hint hint. The final DLC, A Flip of a Coin, sees Tim and Barbara taking a break from their honeymoon to hunt down Two-Face. Obviously it takes place around the same time as GCPD Lockdown, probably a little later, but in such close proximity I think we should place it as simultaneous. In addition to the DLC, Knight received a number of comic tie-ins: Arkham Knight Batgirl Begins, Arkham Knight Genesis, and Arkham Knight Harley Quinn and Batgirl Special. Jesus fuck! Like, I get that successful media based on a comic is going to get some comic material, but why do we need so much of this shit? Most of it's not even good. Let's see, Arkham Knight actually begins with a condensed retelling of Arkham City Endgame, making the latter completely redundant, but it still doesn't bother to explain how Bruce survived being blown up. The artwork is actually understandable now though, so we can finally tell that the Batmobile gets severely damaged here. From there, it carries on up until the game, detailing why Bruce needs certain upgrades, how Bruce Wayne tries to help Gotham recover from Arkham City, and the beginning of Commissioner Gordon's bid for mayor. It starts to get pretty contradictory with the game and other comics in the second half, so it's best to view it as partially canonical, but that doesn't mean we can't use smaller details to help with the timeline. For example, we also learn that Jim's been Commissioner going on 4 years, which is useful info. And then you get weird stuff like how Bruce conceived the Nightfall Protocol because he was nearly killed by the fucking Calendar Man. The fucking Calendar Man! And then it gets even weirder because Vicky Vale suggests most of Gotham thought Batman was an urban legend until a few months ago, despite the fact that she saw him in person and broadcast his fight with Bane 7 years ago during Arkham Origins. What is wrong with you? Batgirl Begins is a 16-page short detailing exactly what it sounds like. Moving on. The Harley Quinn and Batgirl special features Batgirl in a time when she's only a copycat of Batman, not actually working with him, so a little after Batgirl Begins. At the same time, Harleen Quinzel becomes Harley Quinn. Jim Gordon is also the Commissioner by this point, as he was in Batgirl Begins. From these details we can conclude that this story takes place around 3 years prior to Asylum, with Jim becoming Commissioner, then Batgirl Begins, then the special. The Gotham City story Masquerade within Arkham Knight details a masquerade ball held at Wayne Manor where Barbara stumbles upon the entrance to the Batcave. Obviously this is after both Batgirl comics, but it can come mostly anywhere between her debut and Jason's capture. But she does get to know Jason before his capture, so let's just place it shortly after the Batgirl comics. Arkham Knight Genesis naturally details Jason's backstory since he had never been mentioned before the game. Ever. He alludes to Arkham Origins as having taken place a couple Christmases before his first meeting with Batman, setting this about 2 years after that, sometime after Dick Grayson had become Nightwing. Joker ponders how Batman gets so many kids working for him, hinting that both Dick and Barbara are already established, but that doesn't work with how long Jim has been Commissioner. I suppose I could discard that detail and use both Joker's quote and the reference to a past relationship between Dick and Babs to place Batgirl's debut ahead of Jason's, but I feel that Jim's line is stronger evidence, so Jason debuted ahead of Barbara. Jason had been held for 6 months by the time Tim became Robin, then for about a year total, and we learn that Jason only escaped the Joker's clutches during the incident at the Asylum. This places Jason's capture at 1 year before Asylum, and Tim becoming Robin 6 months before Asylum. The rest of Genesis comes shortly before the game, with Jason reminiscing about his time as Robin and making final preparations, so during the same time frame as the main Night comic. From here we can place the Batgirl DLC. Barbara is working with Tim here, placing this within 6 months of Asylum, where she is already Oracle. Pretty short time for Tim to debut, Babs to go on missions with him, get shot and establish herself as Oracle, but there we go. This would need to take place as close to Tim's debut as possible, probably after a few months of training prior to his debut. With Joker fleeing at the end, I think the only interpretation is that he's heading off to plan his attack on Barbara, which we see in flashback in the main game. There's a newspaper on the floor about Batgirl saving Jim, so it was obviously pretty recent. Most likely, Joker goes to Barbara's apartment the following night while he knows Jim is still out looking for him. Arkham Knight: The Riddler's Gambit is a novel prequel to Arkham Knight that was also released in 2015. According to my friend who actually had the patience to read through the thing, which I didn't after the soul-sucking experience that was ploughing through all the comics in a week, the book is set months after City and also depicts the old Batmobile getting blown up, even though Endgame and the Knight comic depicts it being crushed by rubble. It's Tomb Raider all over again. Hint hint. Now I'm told the old Batmobile is being worked on early in the book, so we can just say that it's damaged by the debris, then repaired and blown up soon after, placing the novel after Endgame and during the comic, but before Bruce gets the new Batmobile. Batman Arkham Underworld released in 2016 for mobile devices. It's a free-to-play game where you build up a gang and help various Gotham criminals in the early days of the timeline, but it's not clear exactly when. The game opens with the phrase, "about 9 years ago," but in relation to what? The series doesn't pass in real time. Asylum to City roughly matches up, but Night is set 9 months later and took 4 years to come out, and Origins is a fucking prequel. My best guess is that it's 9 years prior to the most recent point in the timeline, which is Arkham Knight. This is a problem though. Night is set in October, 9 months after City, which is January. Arkham City opened in November of the year prior, which is 18 months after Asylum, setting Night just shy of 2 years after Asylum, which is 5 years after Origins, which is 2 years after Bruce became Batman. That's 9.5 years, which would place this about 6 months into Bruce's career. That doesn't work because Harley Quinn appears in Underworld, but she's still just Harley and Quinzel in Origins after 2 years. And we can't use the costumes to work it out because they're all just taken from the games without much thought. Harley's Asylum costume is referred to as new in that game, and Batman doesn't see it until then, while Croc and Bane wearing their orange inmate pants makes no sense outside of prison. Deadshot refers directly to a couple scenes from Assault on Arkham in Underworld, so it's definitely set after the film, which would be set about 4 years ago. So where the hell this 9 years ago thing came from, I've got no idea. We can either disregard that detail or conclude that they're attempting to retcon Assault to much earlier in the timeline, despite that not meshing with the comics either. I think it's best to disregard the 9 years thing since that's the one that causes the most problems. Likewise, we'll have to disregard Two-Face's minor cameo in Assault since he's still just Harvey Dent in Underworld. I think direct scene references trump a non-speaking appearance that doesn't affect the plot. I guess maybe the squad missions, which I believe were added later, could be set years after the rest of the game, but that's a whole mess I'm not getting into. I'm keeping Underworld all in one block, falling shortly after Assault. It's a shame too because I had a cool theory that perhaps Harley falling out with the Joker before Assault could have been over his abandoning her in the Batgirl DLC, with the bruises he alludes to being from the boss fight, but sadly no. And finally, Batman Arkham VR released in 2016. Arkham VR sees Batman investigating the murder of Nightwing. Now Dick is still alive after Night as GCPD lockdown proves, and this isn't Bruce secretly coming back because this is so important. He starts in Wayne Manor and no one's surprised to see him. Tim believes Joker's voice is coming from a Joker copycat, which he'd only assume if it was after Joker's death. The costumes, much like in Underworld, can't be used for placement because the models are all taken from Night since that game has the highest graphical fidelity. Towards the end, things get weird and dreamlike and an alarm clock can be heard, suggesting the whole thing is a nightmare Bruce has after Joker's death, especially supported by the emphasis on the Joker at the end, and the fact that Dick and Tim can't be dead. Most likely, this is the birth of Batman's inner Joker that taunts him throughout Arkham Knight, placing it shortly before that game. I'm not setting it as simultaneous with the other Knight prequels since they don't mention the nightmares, and that's the Arkham series for now. A few other events we need to include are, of course, Bruce's birth, the deaths of his parents, the debut of Batman, and the encounter that turned the Red Hood into the Joker. With no given years, we can either build the timeline around Asylum, or split it into the years of Batman's career. Numbering the years is very Batmanish, so we'll go with that. First off, Bruce's career begins in year 1. Origins, its comic, and Cold Cold Heart take place at the end of year 2. Origins on Christmas Eve and CCH on New Year's Eve. The birth of the Joker is likely also in the same year because I can't see Joker waiting too long to make his big revenge move. Blackgate is set 3 months after Origins, meaning March of year 3. It's safe to assume that the multiplayer of Origins occurs not too long after the campaign, meaning Dick Grayson becomes Robin in year 3, the earliest possible time. His debut as Nightwing is safe to place in year 4, since I doubt he'd be Robin for for less than a year. Plus, Arkham Origins occurs a couple Christmases ago in relation to Jason meeting Batman and becoming Robin, setting that in year 4, so Dick moving on from Robin can't be any later than that. Initiation's exact time frame is unclear. Some fans place it as Bruce's final year of training, though the true ending to the DLC suggests further training to come, so I don't buy that. I don't think there's any hard evidence, so we'll leave it blank. Asylum and Road to Arkham are 5 years after Origins in year 7. Since it's 18 months prior to the November opening of Arkham City, these two are set in May of year 7. The City comic and Lockdown pick up 6 months after Asylum in November of year 7. Arkham City opens in November of year 8, but the Arkham City game occurs in January of year 9, since it's 9 months before Arkham Night on Halloween night. Arkham Unhinged takes place all around Arkham City, so that's January as well. Harley Quinn's Revenge is 2 weeks later, and Endgame is 2 days after that. Now technically, Night is set 9 months after the Joker's cremation, which occurs at the end of Endgame. But since we don't know when about in January City takes place, we can't say for sure if Harley and Endgame are in January or February, so it's probably best to leave it in January. Catwoman's Revenge is the night after Arkham Knight, the 1st of November. In the Arkham Knight comic, Jim mentions being Commissioner going on 4 years. It's probably safe to assume he became Commissioner in year 5. Assault on Arkham also comes in year 5 due to being set 2 years before Asylum. Then the Batgirl comics fall into the time frame between those two events because Harley debuted in those comics. Barbara's discovery of the Batcave also falls here. We can also place Underworld in the same year, even though it could technically occur early in year 6. Since Amanda Waller is trying to reclaim Deadshot and Harley in Underworld after the events of Assault on Arkham, we can probably assume it's not too long after, sometime in the same year. Jason's capture occurs about a year before Asylum, so around May of year 6. Joker shows him evidence of Tim Drake as Robin 6 months later in November, suggesting that Tim becoming Robin is a recent event. A Matter of Family's Thug Chatter alludes to Valentine's Day, placing it and the Killing Joke scene in February of year 7, only 3 months before Asylum. Damn, Babs goes from Batgirl to Oracle fast. Since Joker makes a Candygram quit before he shoots her, I feel that the DLC could take place in the early hours of Valentine's Day, hence Thug's discussing the holiday because it's not passed yet. Then the news breaks and the paper is perhaps the late edition, and Joker arrives at her apartment late in the evening and shoots her. The events set between Endgame and Night are hard to place precisely, but they're arranged from left to right based on when they begin. VR seems to take place in October based on the prior lack of inner Joker. In Asylum's Crime Alley flashback, we hear Jim mention that Bruce is 8 at the time of his parents' death. His age during any other point is unclear. Most fans who compile the timeline list him as 27 when he first dons the cowl, as is the case in the New 52. For our purposes, we'll assume the same here, placing the murders 19 years before Batman's debut and Bruce's birth at 27 years prior. In Arkham Unhinged, we learn that Bruce met Talia and her father 5 years before City, during year 4. We can slot this quite nicely into the gap between Dick becoming Nightwing and Jason taking up the Robin mantle. Maybe Bruce left Gotham in Dick's hands while he was away as one last test. Now I'm sure some of you are wondering about the Firefly details. See, in Arkham Knight, a firefighter estimates Firefly's actions in Origins as being about 10 years ago, thus setting Knight in year 12. This contradicts the developer statements of Origins being 5 years prior to Asylum, which is the only gap between games with no solid evidence in the games themselves otherwise. If we went with that idea, well, everything we have from year 5 to 9 has to remain together since the evidence is given in relation to late career games, just as everything from year 1 to 4 aside from Bruce and Talia is in relation to early career games. Comparing the two options, the only real difference would be a random 3-year gap between Jason and Babs' debut where nothing of note happened aside from Bruce meeting Talia. And also, I really can't see Jason being the failed Robin if he had a longer tenure than Dick and Tim combined. However, this is evidence from the games themselves, which should trump developer statements, right? One's more logical, one's more official, so let's try and meet halfway. The 10 years is an estimate, so we can assume it could have been rounded up, or it could simply be an inaccurate estimation. Thus, we do have room to reduce it by a year or two to shorten the large gap. I think 8 years could reasonably be referred to as 10 in the heat of the moment. It reduces Jason's tenure and removes any years with no action. Some may disagree, but it's difficult to juggle so many contradicting statements and details, so make your own damn timeline if it bothers you. And that's everything. Just watch WB announce a new game at E3 or before this episode goes live to topple this whole card pyramid and bring back the Joker as a hot topic emo piece of trash. Why are you hyped for that garbage? What's wrong with you? So let's get into this quickly before they convolute things any further. Without further ado, the Batman Arkham timeline goes a little something, oh and remember there's no year 0 because that doesn't work with this setup, so don't bother me in the comments, like this. Year -27. Bruce Wayne is born in Gotham City to Thomas and Martha Wayne. Year -19. While returning home after a night at the theatre, the Waynes are mugged by Joe Chill. Thomas and Martha are shot dead, leaving Bruce in the care of Alfred Pennyworth. Bruce dedicates his life to becoming the best fighter and detective he can to bring an end to crime in Gotham. He spends years travelling the world, eventually entering the tutelage of Master Kidigi for 1 year. Year 1. Bruce returns to Gotham and becomes the masked vigilante, Batman. Year 2. A struggling comedian is forced into assisting Carmine Falcone's men as a patsy. During an altercation with Batman at Ace Chemicals, the so-called Red Hood falls into a vat of chemicals. The chemicals bleach his skin and turn his hair green, driving him insane. Batman begins investigating connections between Falcone and fellow crime bosses Black Mask and the Penguin. December 24th. Now going by the Joker, the Red Hood disguises himself as Black Mask to place a bounty on Batman's head. Batman defeats the 8 assassins and apprehends the Joker, earning the trust of GCPD officer James Gordon. The incident prompts the reopening of Arkham Asylum. December 31st. Victor Freeze seeks revenge on Ferris Boyle for cutting funding to his experiments to save his wife Nora. Batman defeats Freeze and takes both Freeze and Boyle into custody. Year 3. March. The cat burglar Catwoman is hired by Amanda Waller to help the mercenary Bane escape custody at Blackgate Prison. A three-way war between the Joker, Black Mask and the Penguin erupts in the prison to cover up Waller's true motive. Batman quells the riots and prevents Bane's extraction. Waller recruits Deadshot and Bronze Tiger into the first Suicide Squad. During a performance by the acrobatics troupe The Flying Graysons, crime boss Tony Zuko has John and Mary Grayson murdered, leaving their son Dick orphaned. The event is witnessed by Bruce, who adopts Dick and trains him as his crime-fighting partner, Robin. The two intervene in a gang war between the recently escaped Joker and Bane. Year 4. Wanting to get out of Batman's shadow and become a hero in his own right, Dick adopts the identity of Nightwing and moves to Bloodhaven. During a battle with the Joker, Batman is aided by street orphan Jason Todd. Bruce takes Jason in and trains him as the second Robin. Year 5. Bruce is poisoned while saving the life of Talia al Ghul. While recuperating at the home of her father, Ra's al Ghul, Bruce leaves upon discovering Ra's genocidal plans, vowing to stop him. Year 6. Jim Gordon is promoted to the role of police commissioner. Killer Moth attacks a press conference about the Batman and takes the commissioner hostage. His daughter, Barbara Gordon, dons a mock Batman suit and the alias Batgirl to save her father while Batman defeats the villain. Barbara creates her own costume to continue her work as Batgirl. Dr. Harleen Quinzel is manipulated by the Joker into becoming his agent, Harley Quinn. She runs afoul of Batgirl, who forces her to retreat. While attending a masquerade ball at Wayne Manor, Barbara sneaks off to access the Wi-Fi, unwittingly opening the entrance to the Batcave. Bruce takes Barbara on as an apprentice. Amanda Waller sends a new Suicide Squad into Arkham Asylum to obtain a thumb drive from the recently detained Riddler with the secret true goal of assassinating him. Batman stops the squad while the Joker escapes the asylum. Deadshot attempts to assassinate Waller but is stopped by Batman. A new crime boss begins operation in Gotham as a rival to Falcone, hiring numerous supervillains to assist them. The crime boss later disappears under mysterious circumstances. Year 7. May. Jason pursues the Joker and is captured. Joker detains Jason beneath Arkham Asylum and repeatedly tortures Jason to break his spirit. November. Timothy Drake deduces the identities of Batman and Nightwing and convinces Bruce to take him on as the third Robin. Joker informs Jason of this, finally breaking him. Joker shoots Jason on camera to break Batman's spirit as well, but secretly keeps Jason alive. He continues to torture him. Year 8. February 14th. The Joker and Harley Quinn hold Commissioner Gordon hostage at Seagate Amusement Park. Batgirl and Robin defeat the duo, but the Joker escapes. The following night, the Joker arrives at Barbara's apartment and shoots her in the spine, paralysing her from the waist down. She continues to assist Batman on tech support as Oracle. May. Batman captures the Joker and takes him to Arkham Asylum. With help from Harley Quinn, the Joker seizes control of the asylum and releases all of the inmates. Batman defeats the major inmates, including Scarecrow, who is mauled by Killer Croc. Batman saves Warden Sharp and confronts the Joker, who infects himself with experimental Titan formula. Batman defeats Joker and restores order to the asylum. Jason escapes the asylum with help from Deathstroke and begins building an army to seek revenge on Bruce. Scarecrow survives the encounter with Croc, horribly disfigured, and begins plotting his own revenge against the Batman. The Titan in Joker's system slowly begins to kill him. November. Under the influence of Dr. Hugo Strange, Warden Sharp is elected mayor of Gotham. Strange stages a bombing that kills 300 people as justification to initiate the Arkham City project. A number of villains escape the asylum but are quickly apprehended by Batman. Strange begins working with Ra's al Ghul on the Arkham City project and Ra's own goals. November 19th. Arkham City is officially opened in spite of opposition from Gotham citizens, including Bruce Wayne and Vicky Vale. Year 10, January. While protesting the Arkham City project, Bruce is arrested and imprisoned in Arkham. He's injected with Joker's blood to motivate him to find a cure. When he confronts the masterminds, Ra's murders Strange and falls to his death. Joker captures Talia as bait and shoots her dead. Bruce takes some of the cure, but Joker accidentally destroys the rest, succumbing to his illness soon after. 2 weeks later, Harley captures Batman to exact her revenge. Robin frees Batman and the two defeat Harley. 2 days later, Joker's final plan is put into motion to kill Batman with explosives planted in the Asylum. Batman survives, but the Batmobile is badly damaged. Some months later, while dealing with another of Riddler's plots, the Batmobile is completely destroyed, forcing Bruce to commission a new model. October. Jason adopts the identity of the Arkham Knight and teams up with Scarecrow. The two unite Batman's enemies as part of their scheme. Bruce begins experiencing nightmares over the Joker's death as the infected blood resurfaces. An altercation with the Calendar Man convinces Bruce to form a plan for the event of his own death. The Nightfall Protocol. October 31st. Jason and Scarecrow's militia occupies Gotham while the other villains spread chaos. Batman discovers the Knight's identity and defeats him. Scarecrow captures Tim to lure Batman to him and unmasks Bruce on a live broadcast. Bruce defeats Scarecrow, puts the Joker's memory to rest, and cleans up the streets of Gotham one final time before initiating Nightfall. Wayne Manor is destroyed and Bruce is presumed dead. November 1st. Catwoman destroys Riddler's factory and steals all of his money in revenge for him putting her through a death game the previous night. Later that year, Jason adopts the mantle of the Red Hood and begins a crusade of murdering Gotham's criminals, starting with Black Mask. Commissioner Gordon is elected mayor of Gotham, and Tim and Barbara are married. During the honeymoon, Dick fills in as a protector of Gotham, foiling an attempt to free the Penguin from GCPD custody. Tim and Barbara cut their honeymoon short to take Two-Face into custody. Around the same time, a new Batman appears in Gotham to restore the power and mystique of the mantle, and once more strike fear in the hearts of criminals. It can be hard to decide what should and shouldn't be counted as evidence because when you have so many different teams and writers working on the same setting, inconsistencies are bound to pop up. But even then, I was surprised how well certain details go together to make a fairly cohesive setting. But that being said, I was also surprised by how convoluted this would end up getting. I honestly thought this was going to be one of the easier ones. Fuck you guys for making me do... Oh, wait, you voted for Metal Gear, so it's my fault. Damn it!